This is the next panel in Polish House, and this is especially important. I think we will tackle very important issues about digital talent and leveraging the talent of highly professional and highly educated engineers in Poland. And this panel will be led by Tomasz Marciniak, managing partner from McKinsey and Company. So Tomasz, I already welcome you to the stage. And Tomasz gathered on an outstanding pool of speakers. So let me, without further ado, welcome our speakers. Ms. Kate Smaje, global leader of McKinsey Digital. Kate, please. Wiktor Schmidt, executive chairman at Netguru. George Szlosarek, long-time CEO of international telecom operator and now also neutrality.one, one of the businesses. Rafał Kozłowski, president of management board of Asseco Enterprise Solutions. And last but not least, Łukasz Rzeczkowski, founder of Trustedoctor. Looks like everything's set, so I give it to you, Tomasz.
Thank you very much. So first of all, thank you for having us here, and thank you for having the opportunity to talk about the important matter of the digital economy. Digital economy, predominantly in Poland, but also beyond. And we'll start with a short introduction to the discussion with a set of questions, and we'll hand it over to our distinguished guests, and then to you for any questions you may have. So we'll conclude with a round of Q&As around the room. Why we talk about the digital economy? We talk about the digital economy because it became one of the most vibrant and one of the most important growth engines for the Polish economy over the recent years. Of course, this is also true to the other countries and to the other economies, but in particular, the strength of this growth in Poland is very visible. What do we mean by the digital economy as a starting point? We mean by this both the ICT, the digital commerce, but also all the offline spend on the digital devices or digital parts of our economy. And this is the definition scope that we would love to introduce to you. And this is where we will be referring to with regards to any of the data that we will share in a minute. We also introduced the 3 regions of Europe. And why we did it? Because then it's easier to find some common grounds and commonalities in terms of the stage of development, but also the infrastructure aspects and the growth of the digital economy. In particular, we talk about the big 5, the natural 5 largest economies in Europe. Then we also talk about the digital front runners, Scandinavia, Benelux, but also Ireland, those countries that actually are at the forefront of the digital advancement and adoption. But then we talk about the digital challengers. And as you see, this is defined by the Central European states that joined the European Union later and now are the fast growth engines in this part. Digital economy. The penetration of digital economy across Central Europe, digital challengers, front runners is almost equal. It's between 8 and 9%. However, what is strikingly visible is that actually, it has been growing many times faster, this part of the economy, than the non-digital part, or the GDP likewise. And it has been growing in the CEE countries almost twice as fast as in the Big 5, which means that this is truly the most strike of people actually use digital services. What also grew is the number of services that the users use, from 2.5 on average to more than 4. And what is important is actually what it means by numbers, just to give you a sense of a feeling. There are 12 million new users, digital users, that actually adopted services over the last 2 years. And also, the adoption in the group of 65 and above grew by 40% in this part. Numbers, in terms of Polish GDP contribution, 44 billion euros is the share of digital economy in Poland. In particular, digital commerce, also the fastest growing one over the last years, then followed by ICT and offline spend on digital. But what we argue is actually that this growth can be even stronger. And what do we mean by even stronger? We believe that Poland can add up to 80 billion euros of GDP by 2030. This is the scale of the economy of Bulgaria in one country itself. Where do we see this growth? Predominantly in ICT as the fastest growth engine, then followed by the digital commerce, and also with the offline spend on digital, which was initially also the smallest one. But these are the strong foundations that we see that are actually proving that these results are solid, and we've seen it also over the last years with these dynamics to happen. And then finally, there are a couple of thoughts, that we also see that are still dominant. We have still a strong economic growth and economic performance with challenges on inflation, 42% expected inflation over the next 3 years. Vibrant ecosystem, 8 unicorns that already exist in Poland, and the growing funding of at the VC level. We have a very high share of STEM graduates, and actually a very big cohort of population graduating with these degrees. However, this trend is declining. This trend is declining in this part of the world. And the improving infrastructure, yes, improving infrastructure all across, with the following adoption behind the big five, but not too far distance from that. A range of known brands that we see in the region that already, echoed through all across the digital channels as the ones that are actually paving the way for the others. And to summarize, we see that there is a tremendous opportunity to have a very fast and very big digital growth, and to pave it as a way of the pace that was unprecedented in the past. What we believe should happen, we believe that it requires a coordinated actions across multiple levers, from the policymakers, from the business leaders, but also individuals, engaging and ensuring, that all the challenges are unlocked, but also that we remain committed with bold ambition, lifted up, to actually grow the digital part of our economy, and to use it as a growth engine for the future. And I will conclude by this, and now switch to focus on our distinguished guests, just to ask you for your views on these particular aspects. And let me start with Wiktor. And Wiktor, I spoke a bit, about these opportunities and the scale of a chance. How do you see this opportunity? How do you see where it can come from, and how should we think about the future ahead?
Yes, thank you. Good afternoon, everybody. It's always hard to be the first, but I think the opportunities, we are all here probably because we believe that there's kind of bright future in front of us, especially in technology, especially in digital. And I'm quite an optimist, and I think what we need to do is kind of double down on some of the trends that we already see, and some of those trends you've mentioned, some of those kind of stars of kind of early successes of the technology market in the region. I think what you need to do is kind of create a culture of celebrating those successes, kind of paying it forward, and creating this kind of next generation of entrepreneurs and people who can continue to build kind of digital challengers and digital successes in the region, and specifically also in Poland. So maybe just to start the discussion, I think the cultural kind of doubling down on the culture of paying it forward and helping each other from the entrepreneurial point of view is something that I would definitely think about.
Thank you. Let me now jump to you, Rafał, and 40 years of, I think, Asseco legacy in the country. Yes. Yeah. Okay. So even more. So, look, how do you see it from more, at scale corporate perspective, in terms of what are the opportunities, how it affects you as a, Polish-based but international digital player?
Yeah, so this is very interesting because from the beginning of building Asseco, we believe that software and some value-added services are important. Not only talented people that are sold directly to some international businesses or Western economies, but really building something which is valuable for our customers. And we followed this path. But during the 30 years, what we did, we just gathered all the same thinking entrepreneurs like us, So be better and stronger toward the challenges that are coming, from the future, but also toward competitors, potential competitors that it was a matter of time, but they came to Poland, from, I don't know, America or, some other Western economies. Now, something that is ahead of us, and this is a big challenge for companies like us, how to, bring our solutions that are really good and well developed to Western economies. Why? Because most of these countries are pretty, we call it closed for some international players. We are not talking here about some nice, companies, startups that are, presenting some kind of solutions that are good for physical people, but we are talking about, providers of solid solutions for big companies operating in these countries. What we prove already that we can do it in our areas. Yes, so we are very strong in, energy, finance sector, commercial sector. But now still we have a challenge how to go outside. And this is something that really we have to focus on. And I am sure that our colleagues from Poland and from other countries from our region have the same kind of issue. But I am sure that we will find a way.
Got it. Thank you. Łukasz, now focusing on you, let's a little bit challenge ourselves. So you've got a lot of experience from the UK. What are the differences then? What are the potential lessons to be learned from the UK as a more advanced digital economy, and then any advice or things that you see that should be important for the Polish digital space?
Thank you for the opportunity. Good afternoon. So I'm going to frame this from a startup perspective. So just to give you a context, we've domiciled a startup, Trustedoctor, in London, in UK. We've got a technology office in Poland, but the group is actually now headquartered. Further group is headquartered in Madrid, so very international. So first thing that I've come across is when you compare the two economies, Poland's got abundance of tech talent, without a doubt, but a chronic shortage of product managers and commercial sort of business developers. So just to kind of simplify it, we are the brains and the Brits are the storytellers. But that's very, very true. So that's the first thing. Secondly, obviously the access to capital is much different. In UK, majority of VCs are there. There's a fantastic scheme, which I'll bring later on, a fantastic scheme for individuals to invest in startups early on. I think in Poland, the culture is not there for angel investing. What else? I mean, I think, and I don't want to be too pessimistic, but I guess the Polish mentality is very still inward-looking because the market is big enough, to start. We don't look global. Whereas in the UK, I mean, I think the bread and butter thinking is let's go global, let's expand, let's scale. Obviously, if you compare that to the US, obviously it's much different as well. So that's kind of where the differences are. I guess where the interesting fact, which speaks highly for Poland, we've got more women in tech in Poland versus UK, US, which is amazing, and engineering. So that's a great on that diversity front. I think it's really, really promising. So there are incredible opportunities to grow global businesses because Poland's got strong universities. Data science is second to none. We were just discussing before the panel that if you look at some of those global stars, some of the unicorns, there are Polish funded. Some of the Snowflake, DocPlanner was mentioned here. Even PayPal, I mean, as a Polish founder, of Polish origin. So there's a lot of talent out there. And there's a lot of tech talent in Poland, so I think just connecting that ecosystem would be very beneficial. And like our story, so our startup was 2 founders were from Poland and one from Switzerland, 3 from Poland, 1 from Switzerland. And we were domiciled in the UK, so we took the best out of the Polish market, and then also we leveraged our international experience. We were sort of internationally educated, so I think that blended mix is incredible. And what I would say is in terms of tangible advice, I think changing the culture is important. Something that Wiktor said, giving back, collaboration. but also mindset for growth, going global. So when you're setting up the business in Poland, you're not thinking about just your local market, but you're thinking about the global perspective and being very honest about the skill shortages. So for instance, we had this problem that we needed that business development mentality. So we should have done it earlier. We would have been much more successful early on. And the problem is, if you're running out of capital, obviously it's a sad story because you're just not thinking global. So I guess the mentality needs to change. But in terms of the outlook, I think it's very, very exciting. And because of the resources and just there's a lot of innovation that comes out of Poland now, particularly, if I speak for digital health, particularly on the sort of AI front, which is incredible. So I am very, very positive, but obviously there are things that needs to kind of change gradually. Thank you.
Yes, and Kate, we discussed a bit, the startups, the ecosystem, the at scale software services providers. What about the corporate world on the other side? And what are the successful ways of thinking about the digital adoption? What sits on top of the heads? What differentiates the successful one from those that struggle to actually adopt it? And then what would be the lessons to the corporate leaders that are facing this digital transformation challenge in Poland?
Yeah, it's a super question and a big one. So so let me start with it. I think there is no substitute for laser focus on value. Right? And the folks in the corporate world that you see really get this right are absolutely resolute about where the value pool is, not just for the company, but in the industry, for the value chain and where those opportunities are. So laser focus on value is absolutely clear. But there's also an element here which is, and maybe this is back to the storytelling point, so I may do the British thing here, but I think there's a really important need to just raise the aspiration around it. And, I talk to many of my clients about having not just an aspiration, but an outrageous aspiration, that level of boldness, that level of vision. Because I think none of the folks, even on this panel, who have done some of the amazing things that you've done, you didn't do that by being a little bit incremental, right? You didn't do it by over business casing and trying to figure out, no, let's run the numbers just one more time. You did it by having a vision that just said, you know what, there's something here. I don't know fully what it is. I'm going to take a leap of faith, but I'm actually going to jump with both feet and I'm going to do it. And I do think that's one of the things, particularly in the corporate world, where that's not always in the DNA, to really take that leap of faith and say, I can see the market, I can see the opportunity, I also want to help shape Poland's role within that. That is a really important, part of it. And then the last thing that I would say is, it's also really key, particularly this year, probably more so than even what we've seen in the last few, for a CEO or a corporate leadership team to have real focus on the talent, real focus. And part of that is because, it's no stranger to all the news articles about big tech, laying off people. It's no stranger to the challenge of we may have the engineering talent, we're struggling on product management. Actually understanding what that skills mix is, as a CEO, not just leaving that to HR and saying, it's their problem. As a CEO, the best corporates I work with, they know exactly who the best people are. They understand what skills mix they need. They are actively in the market trying to shape and manage that. And it's not at the level of we need data people. It's specific capabilities around data engineering that they're looking for and so on. So I think talent, from a talent perspective, that is absolutely key as well.
Thank you. And now let me come to you, George. And you actually led as a CEO one of these corporate leaders, and it was Southeast Asia, yes. So I would love to ask you for the perspective. Then we keep hearing about these dynamics in Southeast Asia, how this adoption happens far faster. That this is not even an equal game. With Europe lagging behind. What's your take on that?
Right. So yeah, to share my experiences. I was fortunate enough to start in the industry when the internet was being built. So. Interestingly, even now, we're using all this cloud networking. The internet was not built for cloud, right? So it needs a complete re-architecture and reimagining of how we need to, change our infrastructure. But where that journey led us, we started in the UK. We had some small investment, which was, equity, private equity, family office. And then we got to the stage where we needed some funding. And the banks were not interested, frankly put. And so we had a chairman from a big family office in Singapore. And he said, well, look, if the UK banks don't even want to support a profitable, small, growing tech business, then move to Southeast Asia. We are lacking this type of talent. You know, at that time, Asia was attracting companies from US, from Europe. So we moved the operation out to Singapore, ultimately put our headquarters there. And wow, for 12 years, it was a totally different experience. We saw Singapore come from very conservative, largely family office type investment, from traditional sources like trading and shipping, to what is now Asia's leading digital hub. And what was required to make that happen was to build the infrastructure. They took an early view. The Singapore government, and not just Singapore government, but Asia generally leapfrogs, you know, very, very quickly in the technology. So we're still sitting here with a 3G data roaming on my Vodafone. They've offlined their 3G was 3 years ago, and the same can be said for Korea and Japan and Singapore. So they recognize that if you have digital infrastructure at your within your grasp, you can cultivate that talent. You can attract the multinationals to come in. You have to foster a culture of fail fast. Not all innovation companies succeed, but we learn a lot of valuable things on the way. So you have to have an ecosystem of maybe investors and mentorship and board structures and government support that allows companies to, you know, to rehabilitate, to change, to merge and so on. And I think that's how they move very quickly. And now I spent the last 3 years doing a new startup in Dubai, because similarly, the UAE and the countries in the region, GCC, are very traditional in their outlook, but yet they have very long visions. You know, they're looking at 2050, they're looking at 2040, and they're saying, well, how do we transform from being petrodollar to a digital hub? And so they, you know, now Dubai is competing with Singapore for talent, and you know, I've spent the better part of 2 decades doing that, and sort of looking at Poland. We in Poland still, the infrastructure is dated. If you look at maybe the way it's built, it's a lot of east-west, where fiber networks would come from out in Asia, come from Russia through Poland to Frankfurt. Frankfurt, Marseille, London are the digital hubs. So what's required for Poland to become a digital hub? Total transformation and re-architecting its IT footprint. So for that, we need more subsea connecting into the Nordics, because that's where the giant compute fabrics are in. The energy infrastructure, of course, is a profound challenge, and customers call us and say, do you know somebody who would be able to offer a 140 megawatt plot? You know, we often sit and say, in Poland, you can't imagine that kind of availability at the moment for data center. But that's the type of infrastructure you need for not just Microsoft, we heard on the other panel, but all the other cloud companies. If they want to come in, the power infrastructure has to be ready. The subsea infrastructure has to be there. The fiber networks need to be adapted and reinvested, especially around the Free Seas Initiative. There's a lot of work needs to happen there to go from the Baltic to the Black Sea to the Adriatic with enough scale to support an emerging digital youth. Let's say they're coming into the labor force now. Let's say this digital generation, and they will expect that infrastructure to be there. So I really, to Kate's point, definitely need the bold vision, and then it needs government action to attract the companies in. And one of the things that we should, well, certainly Poland should look at, is making it easy for companies to invest. There's still a lot of red tape, and we talked earlier about the EIS scheme, making it a friendly culture for investors to take that risk and really work in lockstep with the government to have a plan to fulfill these big ambitions. So that's kind of what I've seen and what I think we should really take points on board in Poland.
Then Wiktor, when you hear these kind of stories, and we spoke about the talent, we know that this engine is diminishing. Yes, it's not going to be more STEM graduates tomorrow. And also, this talent cost is converging between the Big Five and Poland. What needs to happen to actually then overcome these kind of challenges? How should we think about directions of development growth for existing or the new digital players in Poland?
Yeah, well, I think when you think about talent, the word that comes to mind immediately is education. I think we need to be investing more in an educational system that's modern, that thinks about both ICT and kind of STEM, but also some of the stuff that Łukasz mentioned that is, and I totally agree, is sometimes kind of lagging behind, is things around public speaking, teamwork, things like that are much more kind of a soft skills that all the engineers also need. And I think while we are super strong, and I don't think that the fact that we look at the numbers and we see the kind of STEM graduates going down slightly is a big concern for me. Like when we, in our business, which is, it's a software development business, we actually employ more and more people who are actually not, haven't finished this kind of STEM education. We think that there's more and more need for user experience people who build products, people who sell products, right? So I think this is not a big concern to me. I mean, obviously we need to work on this and kind of increase the educational kind of output, but I think the content of the education from the very, very beginning, when we talk about the early education, but also universities, I think I'm super optimistic in a lot of different areas of growth in Poland. Education is one of my biggest concerns right now, and something that I think we need to almost revolutionize to be able to go to 2030 with some kind of a vision of a digital country and positive future.
Got it. And Rafał, we spoke about education, we spoke about talent. What does it mean for the big players? So what would be the unlocks for you, on what could help you or the other at scale digital software players that already exist in Poland face these challenges, to actually help to overcome or even, accelerate?
So actually, we are not counting on anything that we have very limited, control of or influence on. So, the environment in Poland, but also in other countries, I know them because we are, really very, very much present in different CEE countries, are good enough, yes. Something that still is a kind of a challenge is that we need more brave people from both sides, from the delivery point of view. So believing in our strength, to be ready, really to present kind of a value-added solutions for our customers, but also customers, because most of big or mid-sized customers, they are very much P&L oriented. It means they have to control any spending, and they are really limited in making new investments. So something that I am trying, to say today, to encourage them, to try, at least in limited markets like ours. Yes. So let's imagine the big corporations working in our region. Why not to try with some providers from, our region, with some new model, digitized model, and once it will be proven that it can work, it can be distributed in other countries. Why not to check, potential providers that are coming from our country the same way, yes, to try in a limit scale markets. So this is something that I am believing in, and I hope it will happen.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Łukasz, I loved when you referred to this culture, and fully echo this one. And I'm trying to get from you a bit more of what do we need to really do, yes? In terms of how to build this ecosystem, the culture, the vibe around it, incentivize people to get there. So what do you see, when you compare the two worlds, or even, look outside, I'm sure you do, what are the ideas, or any bold moves that should be pursued?
Thank you. So I'll probably divide them into sort of tangible and sort of visionary. So maybe in terms of tangible, something that was said in terms of a tax break for investing in startup in Poland, for instance, there's this scheme, CIS scheme in the UK, where actually up to £150,000, you can invest in a startup, you can get 50% of that amount back from your taxes. So that really incentivizes people to invest. everyone in the city, everyone, in our peer group, everyone invests. So as a diversification of your portfolio, as opposed to, I don't know, just invest in real estate, you would invest in a startup. That's kind of the tangible. The one thing that I wanted to share with you is, maybe is a thought provoking. There used to be this scheme in Chile where government would give you $50,000 if you relocate to Chile and build a team with the product. It was a fantastic scheme. I would caveat this, you have to build an international team, and maybe you have to have one Polish founder. And then obviously I would provide really simplistic infrastructure in terms of tax breaks, but also the way the business is conducted. I mean, in UK, for instance, running a startup from a bureaucracy point of view is ultra easy. But that's kind of the tangibles, but from a kind of visionary perspective, and I really want to touch upon this because it's very emotional for me, and I really, I've experienced it. I used to be a banker in the past, and then I went into the startup world. It's a very difficult, it's a very brave thing to set up your own business. So I would definitely promote it, but in the sense of, and something maybe that was said before, there needs to be an atmosphere of collaboration, trust, and also we need to allow people to fail, right? So we need to, and when you look at the US, it's all about trying quickly, validating, failing, learning, doing it again. In Europe, it's all about, clipping coupons and being risk averse and being you have to be disciplined, but you need to try and changing that mindset that you're not afraid to innovate. And I also had some discussions earlier on with a gentleman, and it's about we are a great nation of testing, but maybe we're not there in terms of innovation. I really want us to reason, to question. Maybe that goes back to the education point of view, that we need to inject that entrepreneurship early on in our sort of youth. And just the final point is, there's so many, like myself, I've been in the UK for 22 years. There's so many people out there of Polish origin internationally. I would just reconnect with all of them. I think Wiktor is doing some of those ideas already, and then nurture that. Not all of them will come back, but maybe some of them will contribute. I certainly always, in my 6 years, looked for opportunity to give back, and whether it is commercial contract or maybe employing people from Poland, because I do have I'm a very patriotic, and I want to give back and pay forward because the opportunities I was given. So I think that mentality, again, just reconnecting with people and utilizing the skills, because let's be honest, we are not good at everything, but we are good at many things. So let's explore that, let's leverage that. Thank you.
Thank you. And Rafał mentioned that there's a lot of very pragmatic thinking about the budgets, the money spent, the discipline, and so on. Kate, you talk to many of the CEOs, and what would be your advice? How they should shape their thinking and the agenda, how they talk about this digital, how they think about the digital adoption, yes? What shall they do, If we're just to say, what would be the priorities that they should anchor around, just to get it right?
Yeah, it's a little bit back to what Łukasz was just saying, right? You've got to be in the arena. So as a CEO, as a management team, you've got to be in there trying new things, because if you don't try new things, you're not going to learn. And of course, you're not going to get them all right. But as long as you're committed to a learning loop around that's really important. So I think the first thing for me would be a real commitment to learning and leading on that from the front. So, CEOs that I work with take time personally to keep learning. Because the other thing is, any technology trend that we're talking about today is not going to be necessarily the main thing that we'll talk about in 2 years' time, or even possibly 6 months' time. It's going to keep changing. And so as a CEO, you need to be in the arena so that you really understand this stuff, and you need to be learning. I think the other thing that I would say is to really use this as an opportunity to reimagine your business. We've gone through the phase that was just, I'm going to do what I do today a little bit better because I'm going to automate it, or I'm going to use digital technologies to do that. Right? That phase is largely gone. There's a little bit still left, but it's largely gone. It's now much more about some of the technologies we're seeing today are challenging the actual essence, the DNA of the business models that we're very used to. So again, as a CEO, you've got to be open right? Open to really rethinking and challenging yourself on, well, this may have been the way that we make money today. Doesn't mean it's going to be the way that we make money tomorrow. Also doesn't mean that the way we fund things today, the way that we look at returns, the way that we think about, upsides and so on, that doesn't have to be true either. And the folks that I see that are able, back to the earlier point of having that vision, that are able to step out and so on, also having their muscle, using digital as a challenger, right? And really applying that as a tool across their business to ask it. I've had a lot of questions this week around things like generative AI. For me, that the difference there is that it fundamentally changes many, many different industries, because you're not just doing it to do what you do a little bit better. You're fundamentally changing the business model. So I'd love to see CEOs, management teams use this as a moment in time to say the technology is in a new phase. This challenges our business model, and maybe, just maybe, we can have better business models, more profitable, better growth prospects, etc., as a result of really using digital as a superpower, not just as a disruptor.
Thank you. So now, Jerzy, George, I want to leverage your experience and also as a global citizen, ask you for some advice then. But I'll just craft it around like advice to corporate leaders. You mentioned a couple of things about policy-making government, but then also entrepreneurs, digital entrepreneurs. If you could just, what would be your advice to each of those to get it right on the digital front?
Look, that's a big question, and there's a lot that needs to happen across the board. But if we take the broad assumption, we've got to start with having the technology infrastructure, because otherwise we can talk about digitization and imagining many different business models, but if we don't actually have the means by which to deliver it, we'll lose all of our talent, and our education problem will become even more profound, because they'll have no faith and they'll go off to US and Asia and other parts of Europe. So we shouldn't be afraid to really work with the big industries, the hyperscalers, to attract them into the country, because they will teach us a lot of things. They will teach us how to create cultures, how to foster innovation. There's a lot of learning will be required there. To other corporate leaders, I would say, is it represented at the board level? Do we have the right board structures? Have we got the right non-exec structures where we can hire? We don't necessarily have to employ and take those risks at the working level. We can appoint non-execs who have been successful in other areas to bring that knowledge in, to shape that change in the company. Through advisory boards, I've had a recent experience where another company I sit on a board for, we pulled together advisory board members, and they were coming out of the consulting houses and technology companies, and they were interested to see the inner workings of an SME, let's say. And as part of their giving back and applying kind of lessons, really contributed to strengthening the management, giving them that, because it's quite challenging, right? For a CEO, there's a lot going on, there's a lot of risks, so he has to build, or she has to build, that framework around them to have a support network. And so it should start at the board. Do we have the right leadership at the technology level? Are we applying technologies to the business in the relevant way? Governments, are we giving credits to SMEs to digitalize? Recently in Bulgaria, I know they're doing quite a bit of that, and they're supporting that. They're giving grants. There's a relatively straightforward application process. Post-pandemic, the government saw firsthand the total destruction of companies that are not prepared for, what happens if another pandemic hits? A lot of learnings from there. So I think, across the board, we've got to work with the big companies to bring that infrastructure into Poland, not just Poland, but also regionalizing all the infrastructure. Start at the board level, build frameworks to drive that change, and have a plan. Have a plan, set KPIs for the transformation. I think the biggest risk is not doing anything. And we see how quickly, companies are just being decimated, right, if they're not prepared. So I guess there's two potential areas to look at.
Thank you. Now, opening up to the questions as promised, please raise your hand if you have any questions. We are happy to hand over the mic. Okay, I see some of you. Let me just follow the order. If you could just introduce yourself. And then.
My name is Konstantin Magaletsky. I am the co-founder of a Ukrainian-Polish online educational company for coding, GoIT. We are both in Ukraine and launched in Poland less than 2 years ago. I would like to mention and to ask your feedback, especially Wiktor and others from the sector. The negative trend which is in Poland is quite surprising for us to see, because in Ukraine we have like very high demand, yes, But at the same time, I can tell you that we've started and we just had our first full year in Poland, last year, and we've got like, say, 1.5 thousand students, 1,500, So I think it's very important to talk not about just formal education, which is like, my son is studying at Japanese-Polish Computer Academy, by the way, so I have some knowledge about Polish formal education. But I think it's important still to remember about informal education, when basically, like in our case, it's 1 year courses, 10 months courses, we give people as much coding as you can get in the leading institutions as it comes to coding specifically from the practical professionals. So I would like to hear your feedback about like informal or commercial education partially replacing or adding towards STEM graduates in Poland and your view about it. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's excellent points. I think that's also why I said I'm still not super concerned about the official STEM numbers of graduates going down. I think a lot of the knowledge is just almost impossible for the formal institutions to teach, because it changes so fast. Like in technology, like you said 6 months, I would say 6 months or maybe even 3 months. The stuff that you learn as an engineer, and especially in cloud computing, AI, and everywhere, it's just irrelevant after, maybe not irrelevant, but like it's stale after 6 months. So I think Kosti, I think absolutely this is something that we need to look at and kind of find ways to encourage this kind of a more bottom-up approach to education as well, 100%.
If I may add, because one thing which is also important here is that, this IT specialist is not like important itself. I mean, the knowledge about the coding, the language, etc. The connection between the technology knowledge and the industry knowledge, this is the key thing. So something that we are observing in our business is also following this kind of path, that people are coming from industries that they were not IT specialists, but they started to learn technologies, and they are the best because they really deeply understand the processes. So this is an additional thing that could be done after the whole educational normal process. Yes. So
I was going to say that two other thoughts, and I think you're going to be a busy man, is my takeaway from this. The first is, we're also seeing, if you take some of the larger corporates who are doing digital transformation, and many of the roles are changing, there is a real push, particularly in Europe, around reskilling, upskilling, continuous skilling. And that means that it doesn't matter what job you've done, maybe you've done it for 30 years, you're suddenly looking to dramatically reskill. And I think there's been some really interesting research around just how fungible many of those populations are, in a way that we would certainly never have thought of 5 years ago, and definitely not in the last industrial revolution, right? So that's one. The second is, I'm actually seeing, and we do this ourselves as well, a lot of push towards not hiring for specific skills anymore, but hiring for a capacity to learn, right? Because of the level of change, because of the level of ambiguity, what actually is becoming more important with some of those top engineering roles, for example, is what is your intrinsic capacity to be able to learn and keep learning? And that's becoming a much more valuable commodity than necessarily the skills base on your CV. And hence, I think you'll be a busy man.
I can just do one point away from, really valid points, and thank you for the question. I would, coming back to the discussion about education early on, I would actually introduce entrepreneurial, entrepreneurship in schools early on, because let's not just talk about the tech talent, we talk about the talent, as a culture, national culture trait. So things like networking, presentation. So, whenever you're learning something, you should step away and say, could you present that to us? I mean, this is something that I found striking when I was studying in Poland and I went to the UK. My teachers were like, you have to tell me a story. I don't want your facts. In fact, I will give you the book during the exam. Just tell me that you have to be able to reason with me and discuss. So I think those entrepreneurial skills, tangible and non-tangible, needs to be introduced early on in schools, and that's where people will instinctively will divert into innovation and be more building companies and things like that.
Yeah, we talk about education. It's quite funny living abroad. My kids who are teenagers are studying exactly the same curriculum that I did over 40 years ago, which is really quite chilling, isn't it? When we think that, they're about to enter the workforce, and they're apped up and digitized like no man's land, but they don't have those skills, and neither do they show any interest, or at least kind of my kids, and observe them. We should really observe the youth and see what they're doing and inspire them. I mean, we all remember some point in our times we had a great boss somewhere who largely steered our careers to where we are today. That's the sort of thing we need, and home working doesn't really do that. I know it's a really big topic because it's about reducing carbon footprint, and we don't want cars on the road. But how do you foster a culture of innovation, growing your own talent, shaping that talent from behind a Zoom screen? I mean, yeah. So by growing your own, I fully agree with all the other comments.
Thank you. I saw more hands. Yeah. Okay. I think yours first. Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Anna Stovpova. I'm from Bank of England, CBDC, Central Bank Digital Currency. And I have so nice question to you. What is the attitude like to digital currency in Poland, like about cryptocurrency, about stable coins and maybe cryptocurrency? What is the stage of using size of market you have, and what is your perspective in the future? Thank you.
It's not an area I know anything about, so I'll just stay well out of it.
Thank you. Wiktor, Rafał, Łukasz?
Well, I think Poland in some ways leapfrogged some of the Western markets in adoption of contactless payments and some of the kind of more modern ways to pay. And I think that might be one of the reasons that I don't think on the consumer side the adoption is very high. To be honest, I'm not sure how it compares to other countries, but I'm not a huge. I don't see much happening in this on the consumer side, right? There's obviously a lot of B2B application of the blockchain infrastructure, but from the cryptocurrency coins, I don't see much traction in Poland, myself at least.
So, if more questions, let me just follow your. I'll come back to you.
Yes, hello, my name is Daniel De Giusto. I'm the co-founder of Tech to the Rescue. We provide free technology for nonprofits. And my question is actually not about technology or nonprofits right now, but about well-being and empowerment of leaders in organizations. How would you take care for people that are in leadership roles and many times are really extensively pushed by their teams, by the management, by other stakeholders in their roles? How would you approach this? I would appreciate your point.
Maybe if I can start, because it's a hot topic. I'm in sort of in healthcare. So what I would do is I would actually provide them as many benefits as possible, and I'll ask them to try them all. The reason for that is well-being is a very personal thing. So maybe mindfulness works for you, but doing sports is for others. Maybe maybe coaching sessions, or maybe dietary changes to your lifestyle. So I think well-being is a very, very sort of broad topic, and it's very personal. So I would definitely make sure that the culture is there, that there is no pressure to be vulnerable. Actually, this is really important. Something that we never talk about. That particularly with men, actually, we're the worst. We need to speak up if we need help. We need to be vulnerable, and we need to be understanding to one another. Right? We need to kind of get rid of the judgmental kind of nature. And once we have that culture in the organization, I think it naturally changes for the better. How could you cultivate that culture? Like I said, I mean, I would definitely introduce a lot of initiatives and make sure that people take full advantage of them.
In my experience, I've come to learn and sort of availed of structures, board structures that really help this. Transparency in an organization is critical, and it's still scary how many companies you go to that don't have proper board oversight or independent oversight, or certain things are held in certain units, which creates a lot of stress on leaders because you're creating factions within a company. We see that all the time. We've seen high-tech gurus completely lose control of companies because transparency wasn't there. And I think transparency helps because then you can actually effectively coach and lead from from a board level. You can have a good non-executive oversight structure that's there to support the CEO. And ultimately, if there are problems brewing in the distance, it's down to the board to put the right leaders in place. Because let's be honest, doing startup, you need those leaders because they have the ideas, they're fostering the business and they're growing. Are they the right leaders to take the company through the various iterations of its growth? That requires different leaders at different levels, and we shouldn't be afraid of touching those topics. And that comes with the transparency, because if you can't see it, it's brewing under the surface. So, big fan of transparency and proper board governance around these issues.
Yeah, I also think it's really important, particularly in the light of hybrid working and everything else, to know your team, right? Really know your team. So when you ask, "Oh, how are you?" and you get the first "fine," really, are you fine, right? And actually really know your team, because what we certainly find in a bunch of our research is it's often, not one particular thing that makes it hard for an individual. It's often when something comes in from left field, right? Maybe actually, they had a lot on at work, but suddenly something's happening on the home front, or suddenly there's something really different and congruent on the work front, and it's that kind of cacophony of issues that often triggers this. And so, really understanding the human, where they are, what they need, and so on, I think is really important. And it's particularly in a time where, in my humble opinion, I think being a leader in any organization is almost the hardest it's ever been. I mean, we've been talking about technology a lot today. You're having to manage for multidisciplinary teams of folks that you maybe don't fully understand what they do day to day, but you've still got to manage them, you've still got to lead them. You're doing it at a time where the external environment is more uncertain, more chaotic possibly than it's ever been, and where the sort of fundamental building blocks of either your business, the technology around you are changing and will continue to change. That's really hard to lead in. So even just the cognitive pressure on individuals is high. And so for me, there is just no substitute from knowing them, listening, taking the time to do that, and figuring out what suite of solutions, because I agree with you, it's never one thing, and it will be different for different people. What suite of solutions can you give them access to and encourage them to take that will help you on that journey? But, leadership behavior right now, it's hard. And I think as companies, we've got to help the next generation of leaders with how to do it, because it doesn't look like it did when, certainly we all grew up in the firm. So I think it has pluses and minuses, right? On the one hand, can I connect with more people during a day and really check in and so on? Yeah, I absolutely can. On the other hand, when you're behind a screen, can you pick up on all those invisible cues? Do you have the time to really check in on someone and how they are? Are they physically with you enough for you to pick all of that? I'm not sure. So for me, technology can be a double-edged sword on this. Where I think it really does help at an overall company level is the data, which comes back to your transparency point. Actually keeping that pulse on the organization. Where are we seeing pockets that, don't seem to be as happy as they were before? And by the way, I know happiness sounds like a generic term. I actually think it's really, really important to understand what makes your people happy and how do you continue to engineer for that as a leader.
This is one of the biggest challenge, I would say, especially for our industry. Why? 70-80% of our cost, let's say, comes from the salaries of people. It means that, the majority of the kind of background of our business are people. And it's great definition how to be a great, manager. But the question from the top point of view, how to bring this to the big organization. Asseco employs more than 30,000 people. So imagine that the CEO of our company, Adam, he thinks how to bring that kind of values and culture to the overall organization. It's really not easy. How we are dealing with this? We call our model federalistic or federation model more than corporation. It means that we are trying to push as much as possible responsibility, but also potentially the influence on what we are doing down to the structure. And it brings, a lot of engagement from the people. And we believe that people can be kind of a host in their organization. So this is how we are trying to do this. But nevertheless, it's a great challenge and really kind of a problem.
Okay.
Thank you very much. My name is Kasia Lasota-Heller. I'm president of Swiss-Polish Blockchain Association, and I would like to ask you one question and perhaps address the issue of CBDC asked by the other lady. In our organizations, there are many companies dealing with AI, really newest technologies, and they come to Switzerland. They make a conscious decision not to develop the business in Poland, but they would go to Switzerland, some of them to the US. When I ask them why you're doing this, they say it's so much easier to find investment for them if they Swiss, if they US, if they set up in Delaware, even if they only a director who is signing papers and the whole R&Ds is developed in Poland. So my question to you, is this really the perception? Do you see something like that? And it might be a reason because they say they may get in Poland, let's say maybe 500,000 euro for 70% of shares, when they in Delaware they're giving 20% away and getting 10 millions. So that will be the question to you. And just to address the question of the CBDCs, I was recently participating in a workshop organized by Swiss National Bank and Polish National Bank, and the attitude of Polish National Bank is they are too big to ignore. They will be doing something, watching them, but at the moment probably nothing will happen. Sorry. So.
If I may, because I've actually raised finance both in Poland and UK and US. Yeah, it's very true. It's access to capital and the mentality is different. You know, if you want to raise more money, you have to go to the US, and many times the US investors will require you to domicile in the US, and we've got some examples of Polish startups like Booksy that domiciled in the US, but it's actually successful European and Polish startups. So so that's one thing. It's a challenge, but I think we're, as a region, we're getting a lot more spotlight now, and because of all those successes, we need to create more successes regionally, and then that would draw attention to the investors. I mean, I'll give you an example, digital health specific. You know, we've got something like Doc Planner and Informatica, and then we've got other things like Stetomi and Telemedi, and all these companies making their way ourselves as well. And then obviously once the investors invest and they see the potential, they say, oh, this is really interesting. But I think what they're looking for is not just the jurisdiction. I think they're looking for mentality. Going back to what we were talking about, the global team that utilizes the skills. Unfortunately, we're not really selling ourselves really well. So maybe there's a thought-provoking again. I would love to see Poland, and I'm trying to be politically correct here, not to overstep my mark, to market ourselves, you know, to the world. You know, just making sure, hey, Poland. I mean, I recently went to a presentation of another country, and they had a really fresh approach in how they market their country, so people come. I think we need to inject that that imagination, but also bring investors and hone our own investors inside. So we definitely need a lot more investors on the early stage. We need to have a lot more money that it's not strings attached. You know, some of the governmental money is very KPIs driven. So I gotta tell you, I know a lot of people that were giving back the money because they're, you know, the business plan on the day one is not the business plan tomorrow because it changes. We've pivoted like 4 times. So I think there needs to be a shift. But undeniably, US is the biggest source of capital. UK is big for the European stage. But maybe this will actually change with all these developments in the region and Poland as a frontier. Maybe we are becoming this hub for capital, but we need to nurture that.
Can I just quickly just double down? I think you George mentioned infrastructure. I think I would encourage us to think about infrastructure much more broadly than it is like, you know, like cables underground. I think the image of the country and what we say about ourselves, like storytelling, and what you know our politicians are saying on the public kind of scene, is something that creates this image and can influence, you know, investors, can influence people that you're trying to attract to your business to come to Poland and live in Poland and work for whatever business is. I think that the kind of we need to. You were talking about, you know, Dubai, Singapore, like the amount of money of those countries or cities invest in the image of the country as being open, as being innovative, is just, you know, unbelievable. And I think, you know, we're doing something here which I think is great. You know, the Polish house here in Davos is quite impressive, but we need to do more for sure.
Thank you. Last question.
Well, more comment than question. You mentioned CBDC and Polish attitude, and Kasia mentioned as well the Polish central bank. It is impossible to develop CBDC approach without support of the Polish central bank, strong support of the central bank. But there are talents and there are companies in Poland which are working on technology. I'm CEO of Bilon Group, which is Polish British or British-Polish startup, British because of the capital market in UK, and Polish because of the talent pool of IT engineers. And we did a lot in terms of preparing the technology for potential use of CBDC. We are cooperating with Bank of England. We are cooperating and we are a member of Digital Pound Foundation, and I think that this is the way. This is the future. I strongly believe that some kind of digital currency is the future, but not necessarily the crypto. I'm not a big fan of crypto.
Yes. So thank you very much. We will conclude with this. Thank you very much for the insightful discussion. Thank you very much to our audience for being with us, and thank you to all of you, our panelists. Thank you for your time and all of the actions. I hope that many of them will resonate, and we'll see them live soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you.